whereas the right-hand drawing of the building was built to the design of another architect. And this is another example of what people tend not to know about today. This drawing is a proposed design, and then the modification by that flap that sticks down over it with a pencil alteration. And it's because, of course, they didn't have plan printing in those days. It wasn't cheap to just do another drawing. So this was the easy way to show revision to the design. And the surprising number of drawings have these flaps, or have this is the part where they've been torn off, but where they were in place originally. The next category is the media themselves. Drawing linen is unfamiliar to most people today, and yet it's the main medium for good quality drawings in the 19th century, and all these other materials, which I didn't go through. An understanding of those is pretty essential, particularly when it comes to multiple drawings. Because once you have a die line which has been covered, and many curators, young people, wouldn't know what it was, they wouldn't realise there are probably 20 copies of that drawing in different versions. And so the importance you attach to it is likely to be much less. If you're collecting, at least you're alert to the fact you're going to find the same drawing in other versions when you go through the collection. Then how to interpret them, how to interpret the various symbols and so on, and to understand them. And again, going back to that composition drawing, the important part of that drawing was not the design, it was the bit on the left-hand side which showed how they do the covered verandas, which are in all the photographs of Melbourne streets until they were outlawed in 1859. So you get detail how the canvas is tied down. This is the sort of data you can get off the drawing if you're alert to it. And then just reading the drawing. So I would ask, and I have these slides because I teach sort of similar things to my students, how to understand all those elements without going through them in detail. But we begin with the broken section line at the top and how a broken section would work, down to towards the bottom. There's a particular detail there, and here are the answers to it. At the middle, the speaking tube termini. Now, if you didn't know what this was, this drawing is actually very, very important because it illustrates, and here's a section, that's the broken section we saw shown on plan in detail. You can see the tubes going down. Now, these tubes in this building, they're like that. This is a later example. Those ones in the drawing of the 1860s were amongst the first probably in Australia. The speaking tube was introduced in Britain around about that time. So the person cataloguing that drawing really ought to know about that and enter it in the catalogue entry. Just other obvious examples, and this one here is showing the balconies on the Rialto building in Collins Street, now much older, but that's a picture as it was. And that arch, which you can't tell straight away, is actually iron with concrete on top, and it's material called Traeger weldbeck, which was patented locally and used in Australia, although it's of German origin, unknown in Britain and America. So again, it's a sort of very important detail you need to know about in cataloguing that drawing. And this, again, you see, presented with that drawing in the centre, would the average young curator know what's going on? Of course, it is an addition. There are elsewhere the drawings for the 3-storey or 4-storey building. Then there's this drawing for positions, and you can see how it was and how it became to the left and to the right. Then understanding the drafting practices, the use of tracings, which of course are common before plan printing, the standard colours which indicate materials, what metal, what brick and so on, and that sort of thing. Understanding the way the contract details work. So for example, this one I show my students that you can expect to find the parties to the contract, not the architect, it's between the owner and the builder, but the architect or his draftsman may appear as witness very commonly. So if you're alert to the personnel, you may recognise the person who signed as witness. These things I don't go into in detail because it's what people like you would offer, much more than us, although I have been involved as a valuer and so on in some of these things myself. But it's telling them how you would weed an incoming collection and how you preserve it and all those sorts of things. The other category of drawings, less important perhaps, is measured drawings done in modern times, which this library has a collection of, and which some other libraries do as well. And it's important to understand those too. We collect from our students the actual field notes, as shown here. You probably wouldn't, you probably discard those, but it's an important decision of policy. If you're accepting measured drawings, what it is you're accepting. We get the field notes and the photographs with the actual drawing in both hard copy and digital copy. I haven't gone into the digital issue either, which I imagine Peter will cover more than me. So these are just examples of what you get in measured drawings, very different from the working drawings and so on, the historical ones. And this is the sort of question I can ask people understanding these drawings, how you interpret the stereos, for example. details, and the odd case where a student actually does a reconstruction. The building has been altered and there's enough data to do reconstruction, which you must not mistake for the actual way the building is today. Now, the practicalities of mounting such a course. The big problem, of course, is cost. Getting mean-minded libraries and so on to fund junior staff to go perhaps interstate and have accommodation and cost of a course. Who contributes to it and whether they have to be paid. Where you give them the hands-on experience of drawings, the appropriate collections, publication of papers, which I'll come to in just a moment in more detail, and the lunch and tea, which I find surprisingly important. I find that if people, and I run these conferences regularly, sort of touring conferences, if they go off to by themselves to different cafes for lunch, or if they go back to feed the meter or produce phone calls at the office, half your momentum is broken down. It's actually making people have lunch together that does a great deal. So the conferences I run, and we do these sorts of things pretty regularly, I always have a reasonably generous level of catering. The reason why I thought we could do this, and I know what I'm going to do, is when this was first put to me by Mary, I thought she might mount a course in connection with this meeting here in Melbourne, and we'd be able to run it, and people would be coming here for it, and so it could be done. But we can't do it if you're going to be meeting in Brisbane or somewhere else. It's just not going to work. The question was whether people contributing should be paid. That is, whether if I ask you people to come from interstate and talk about some aspect of drawing, you have to be paid and your accommodation paid. I have to assume that your institutions pay you. If this course will do matter as an economic rate, so people have to pay a lot, you'd have to assume the contributors are not being paid. With the qualifications I come to. Now, this is what we do. I publish the papers before the conference, not after. And that means a number of things. First of all, the speakers, who normally leave it to the last minute and throw their talk together the evening before, have actually thought about it and prepared it. The people at the conference have it in their hands. Instead of trying to just write down the names of things they can't spell, they have the confidence of knowing the papers here in front of them, and they can actually listen and take part in the debate. And the third point is, of course, that remains as the ongoing textbook afterwards, which can be, and these have all been very valuable afterwards. So they come to the conference and they find this perfectly done, completed set on the desk in front of them when they attend.